extremely complimentary of the role that P20 Win played in and facilitating the data and analytics that were necessary to draw the conclusions and identify the disconnected population. So I think a great demonstration of the value of all the work that's gone into P20 Win. Katie, I'll turn to you. I think you probably have a couple of housekeeping notes before we dive into the agenda.
Sure. So just a quick housekeeping is that this is a public meeting. So as you may have noticed, we are recording these and we do post them to our P20 Win meeting website. So, but that is the one housekeeping item I had.
Great. So I'll ask for any public comment before we start. Is there any member of the public, not a member of the P20 Win board, that wishes to make a comment? You can indicate by raising your virtual hand on the Teams screen. Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised. Are you, Katie?
Nope, I don't see anybody.
All right, great. All right, so no public comment today. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Dante Bartolomeo.
Here.
Elena Trueworthy for Best Buy.
Here. Here.
Isha Canada.
Here.
Wonderful. Sarah Fox.
Here.
Scott Gall.
Here.
Alalia Garcia.
Present.
DJ Gifford.
Present.
Jan Keeney for Rai Katsuria.
Here.
Tim Larson.
Yes, ma'am.
Chris McClure.
Present.
Gary Roberge.
Here.
Ellie Valeries.
Here.
Ajit Gopalakrishnan for Charlene Russell Tucker.
Here.
Jen Witness. She's running a little late. Mike Williams.
Here.
And Rika Rin is absent. Okay, we have a quorum.
Thanks, Katie. All right, so the first item on our agenda is approval of another new agency to add to P20 Win, the Office of Workforce Strategy. And Kelly Marie, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. So we have received recommendation to add OWS as a new participating agency in P20 Win. There was a letter recommending adding the Office of Workforce Strategy in your board materials packet that you received before the meeting. So I'd like to entertain a motion to add OWS to the P20 Win board. And then once we have a motion on the table, I'll invite Scott to review the recommendation letter and see if Kelly Marie has any comments to offer.
So moved. I make a motion.
Is that Dante?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Tim, are you seconding?
Yeah, I'll second that,
All
Commissioner.
right. Thank you. All right. So moved and seconded. And so any discussion, I guess. Scott, you want to review the recommendation letter?
I'll just review it quickly. It's in the board packet, and you can screen share it if folks needed that. But I think in the past, as discussed earlier, in the past few years, we've undergone a lot of expansion for P20 Win. We've also had a lot of changes for workforce development in the state. The Chief Workforce Officer by statute is on the executive board, and Office of Workforce Strategy was created 2 or 3 years ago. I think Kelly will correct my timing on that, to coordinate and work across programs in the state. Since that time, I think one of the things that was not envisioned originally is that the Office of Workforce Strategy would actually run programs and administer programs, collect data, and want to sort of measure and get outcomes for the programs that they're administering. And so with that change, and particularly the prominence of some of the programs and the way that they are a core part of the workforce system in the state, and that they interact with a lot of other workforce programs, housing programs, and so on, we drafted the letter to make the recommendation to add Office of Workforce Strategy so that they can participate in the same process these other agencies are, and we can look at their program participation participants and measure outcomes for those programs in the same way that other agencies are doing here. So that's the recommendation to add Office of Workforce Strategy as a participating agency in addition to, I think, to the existing role the Chief Workforce Officer has on the board. And we're excited to have had them participate for the past few years and to continue to do so in a new fashion, subject to board's approval.
Thanks, Scott. Kelly Marie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And we're really excited to be able to be part of the P20 WIN family of state agencies. Data is one of the founding principles of the work that we do. Everything that we do grounded in real data. So for us, this is an exciting opportunity to be part of the P20 WIN working group and be part of the data collection process.
Thanks, Kelly Marie. Is there any further discussion of this motion? Please go ahead, Ajit.
Yes, hi. Hi, Kelly and everyone. Not knowing that much about Career Connect and exactly what data is in there, it may be helpful to maybe just get a high level sense of what data actually goes into Career Connect, who enters that data, who maintains it, what does it say? Does it include names of the individuals, what certification programs they're in, what is the single ID that's used for candidates, how is the just some sense of what data is there might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So we're working very closely with Dante in the Department of Labor and the workforce boards on the data that we collect and ensure that it has lined up to the data that the workforce boards collect. So not only the demographic data of people, but the programs that they're in, their locations by zip code, whether they're completing programs, what they're earning for credentials, and then what jobs they're getting as a result of those job training programs. So people that complete and people that are employed. We have a agreement with the Department of Labor for CT hires, and we've taken the Career Connect programmatic dollars and we created a generic modular on CT hires. So all of the data, once a participant is enrolled in a job training program, their data will be put into CT hires. We've been collecting that data on spreadsheets until the opportunity came to get that modular up and running on CT hires. We also have people that are coming through a virtual portal, and we're collecting very little demographics on them in that portal because right now that lives at one of the workforce boards. And it is connected, I believe, to their Pearl system. So all of the information that the Pearl would collect gets collected for Career Connect. We also have the Good Jobs Challenge, and we're again working with the Department of Labor on potential of another generic model for the participants that will be going through the Good Jobs Challenge. I don't believe we've completed that one yet, Dante. I don't remember at this point. There's so many other things going in the air, but.
Yeah, I don't either, Kelly. I'm sorry. I'm not sure where I'm not sure where the team is on that.
So the idea here is to make sure that we're not creating a separate data collection and reporting system that isn't completely aligned to the work that's already being done in this space, but that we're adding to. Did that answer your question, Ajit?
Yeah, it does. So the candidates would actually put in their names, or are there case workers, case managers at the different one-stops who are entering their names into the system?
Yes. So when they come into the portal, which is just the recruitment mechanism to say, raise your hand basically, and I'm interested, the participants put in their name, contact information, and zip code. From there, they get connected to a case manager, and then become enrolled in CT hires. So I believe that there's a part of it that they have to enroll themselves and complete certain data, but then that case manager from there forward collects that data and inputs that data just as they would any other funded program.
Thank you.
Ellen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't actually have a question this afternoon, but I do have a comment. And as everyone's aware, CTEX is the newest kid on the block in terms of membership with P20 Win. So I'll keep my comments short, but I can simply say that Dr. Valera's, her membership on our advisory board, in addition to the work that she does each and every day with the Office of Workforce Strategy, has kind of created a perfect trifecta for us in that we are garnering data every single time we're able to meet with, in conjunction with the Department of Labor, to take a look at what are the workforce needs, what are the driving factors behind what is working well, what is not working as well in terms of workforce development and strategies that we all kind of undertake going forward. The Department of Labor and Office of Workforce Strategy and CTEX participate in every Thursday meetings with the Governor's Workforce Council. And it's an amazing discussion when we begin to put the data together in each of our respective cocoons, if you will, and we discover that what we're doing really is in harmony with what the governor's workforce initiatives are, and that data is invaluable. And so going forward, I think if P20 Win is really wondering around, okay, so how does this prong fit with the work that's already going on? It in fact is really kind of the third angle of the triangle, or actually the first angle of the triangle, if you will. And it's been incredibly helpful for us with Dr. Valeri's help to take a look at their strategic plan, as well as the data that's coming out of CT Connect and also the Department of Labor data. So I just wanted to put that in there, and I appreciate your listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sullick.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we are going to call the roll. We talked a little bit about doing a show of hands or a voice vote, but in order to make sure that the votes are properly recorded by when we're meeting by virtually like this, we need to go ahead and do a roll call. So with that, I will ask that Katie, you call the roll and take the vote.
Okay. So the motion is to add OWS as a participating agency. Dante.
Yay.
Elena.
Yay.
Isha.
Yay.
Sarah. Sarah Fox.
Yay.
Sorry about that. Scott.
Yay.
Alalia.
Yay.
Deidre.
Yes.
Jan.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes, ma'am.
Chris.
Yes.
Gary.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Ajit.
Yes.
Jen, if she has joined us yet. And Mike.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Great. Welcome, OWS. Kelly Marie, glad to have you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is an upcoming visit from the U.S. Department of Education. So that's exciting. I think Katie's going to walk us through a few of the details about that.
Yes, so we received the 2019 SLDS grant that allowed us to expand P20 win to include additional agencies and also really clarify our learning agenda. And this grant will be wrapping up early next year. And so the U.S. Department of Ed will be joining us for a site visit on Tuesday, February 13th. And there will be an executive board session for 30 to 45 minutes that morning. And we will be following up after this meeting with additional details. But if you plan to hold around 9 a.m. on February 13th, that would be great. The meeting will be in person at 450 Capitol Ave.
Dante?
You are on
Thank-
mute.
Thank you. So I'm not clear on when you say executive board, is that just a couple of folks or is that this whole board? I'm sorry, I just don't know how we're divided up.
Great question. So we envision that it will be the entirety of the board if possible. So Dante, definitely, since your agency is the integration hub. And so this is an opportunity to provide feedback on how the grant went, if there are improvements or changes that could be made, but it's a great opportunity to sort of provide feedback to our federal counterparts. Scott, I don't know if you have any other, anything to add on that.
No, just to add, I see Tim has a hand up. It's not a board meeting. It's a way to, speak with Department of Education about the work on P20 win, and they like to hear from the executive leadership. And so I would think of it as kind of a more informal session, but with the members of the board, but not a board meeting.
Right.
Tim, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Katie was kind enough to put together sort of a flow chart of how data comes in and the responsible parties this afternoon. She provided it to me. Thought it might be a good idea if she circulated that around to all the committee members, just as sort of a refresher on, the inner workings and the flow of how business is being generated. And I think it's a good visual, and it'll also be important, I think, for members to understand their roles and responsibilities as it relates to the effort here at P20 Win.
Thanks. I'll definitely share that with everybody following the meeting. I'm glad that it was helpful.
Katie, could you also send just a save the date for that time to the board members? Thanks. All right. Anything else on the Department of Ed upcoming meeting? Great. Okay, moving on to item 6 is data requests. We are going to get an update from Katie on active and incoming data requests, and then go through the learning agenda with Rachel Leventhal-Wiener from OPM. So over to you, Katie.
Okay, so we've had a really active year with our fulfilling data requests. So in 2023, we've completed 5 data requests. That includes the really large BCG requests that we've heard a lot about. Many of these have focused on education and workforce. We have 6 requests that are currently in analysis. And so hopefully we will be able to wrap that up and share those reports out with the group early next year. And then we have 1 match that's in the process of, the match has been completed and we have to send it back to the requesting agency to finish their analysis. So we're in different stages of completion with those. We also have 5 data requests that are in development and in review. And so 2 of them are related to grants that we've received. So we have an evaluation of the Roberta Willis Scholarship Program that's facilitated through the IES grant that we've received. We have the OWS request, which we discussed very briefly earlier. That's being moved forward with the WDQI grant. But then we also have 3 other data requests that don't fit neatly into the learning agenda, and it's part of the reason why we are having these conversations to expand it. But we have an evaluation of the Young Mothers Program at Roca. We have an evaluation and impact of housing choice vouchers in the New Haven area. And then we have received a request from the Sentencing Commission that will be looking at how people in reentry and on parole are engaging mental health services and if there is an impact on recidivism. So we have a lot going on in heading into 2024, and to make sure that we're still like meeting your priorities, making sure that your policy questions are being addressed. We want to use this as a jumping off point to revisit the learning agenda. And so I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Katie. For those who I haven't met, my name is Rachel Leventhal Weiner, and I used to sit on the Data Governing Board as a representative from the Office of Early Childhood, but I've been on the OPM Data and Policy Analytics team for the last year, leading our evaluation and impact of American Rescue Plan funded projects. So I've worked with many members, either yourselves directly or members of your agencies, on projects that have been funded by the American Rescue Plan state and local fiscal recovery funds. And a lot of the work around evaluation and impact comes from the reporting guidelines from that federal funding. One of the things that we've done with those funded projects is talk about the value of a learning agenda. So we ran a series of workshops and working sessions. And so we took some of that content and we brought it to the Data Governing Board, knowing that the nature of the data requests and the work has shifted and grown with the addition of all of the new agencies to this table. So we spent some time last Friday with Data Governing Board members as an initial brainstorming session. And the structure of that workshop was very similar to the structure of the workshop that we ran with all agencies that have American Rescue Plan funds. We provided agencies with a view into their mission and provided them with some prompting questions around some of the questions they have about their work that would guide their own agency learning agenda. And not every agency has a learning agenda, but this was just kind of a first stab. And then what we did was we took all those questions and combined them together into new content question learning agenda areas. So what I'm going to present to you is a slide that has a visual representation of those. It takes the original current P20 Win learning agenda and really expands it to include all of the potential work that all of the agencies who are now at the table are able to actually bring to bear with the data that you collect. So I'm just going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. And what you see here is, remember, a visual representation and a first draft at some of the issue areas. So initially, a lot of the issue areas that we focused on were in the K-12 education, higher education, and workforce space. But many of the questions that agencies brought to bear were in many other spaces about their own work and about work that they could do with other agencies. So as an initial draft for the folks who, we wanted to hear some feedback and see if you think that this covers kind of the spirit of the work that's possible with the data that's collected at all agencies. These are the issue areas that we think should fall under an initial draft learning agenda. So there are lots of questions around family, children, and communities. And those are, from the early childhood space, the child welfare space. There's lots of opportunities around physical and behavioral health. Higher education, from both sort of outcomes and performance to financial aid to transition into the workforce and outcomes around personal goal setting, as well as job attainment and growth. There's a lot of questions around workforce development. One thing Katie hadn't mentioned about requests is that our team is in the process of drafting a number of data match requests related to American Rescue Plan funded projects around workforce development. So we're really excited that that we sit right in the same unit. We're neighbors, so we can just quickly chat about these things to get them rolling. There's a lot of questions that folks have around early education and K-12 education, the links between them, but also questions about each of those areas on their own. With the advent of court support services and Department of Correction, we have lots of questions about justice, incarceration, and reintegration into society. And housing just there's all kinds of overlap with all of these areas and housing security. So these were the initial areas, and in talking with Scott and Katie, we wanted to present these as kind of an initial draft agenda and see if folks had either feedback, ideas, questions, additional questions that they think might, be missing. So this is, again, a first stab, a first draft, and and I can say more about the activity, but I'm interested to see feedback and reactions. Kelly, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that thank you. Visual representations are always so much easier to understand and see how the pieces fit together than long narratives. And this is a really great graphic, and I really do appreciate the expansion of the P20 Win data requests to touch some of these other categories that you might not have touched before. They all are interrelated in so many different ways. Learning about how housing is related to physical well-being, which is related to the ability to work, and how we can support those who are being re-entered into society after long periods of incarceration. All of these things I think are just really important for participation within the system. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Kelly. And one thing I should say is that many of the questions that your members of your agency, the data governing board members, logged were questions that were kind of like agency alone questions. How do we know we're meeting our mission? And for some folks, you have a strategic plan with metrics and performance measures that you're tracking. Others have a different approach. We focused as much as we could on the questions where there really is an interagency kind of connection. And these are just the questions of the data governing board members that were in attendance. This is a great exercise that Scott, hopefully I'm in the right lane to say, what's good for American Rescue Plan is good for all state business. So if you're interested in seeing the materials that we shared with the data governing board, or interested in having a similar kind of thought exercise with your leadership team, we're happy to also engage in that kind of work, because that's where these great questions that sort of bring to bear these interagency opportunities come from, is that brainstorming and thinking about how are we meeting our mission? How do we know? What impact are we having? So that's the work that I'm currently overseeing, but it dovetails really nicely with the work of this group. Other questions or thoughts, feedback, things that are missing, things that are here that you like?
I guess, Rachel, one question I have is, what are the next steps with this draft learning agenda? What do you need from the board in order to move forward from here?
That is a great question. So I think Katie and Scott and I need to discuss, there were some folks who weren't present at the meeting, so we want to make sure that their questions are kind of represented in the catalog of questions that we collected initially, just to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. I don't think that we've missed anyone, but in the event that people think that there's a gap or a hole, we haven't yet drafted the sort of text format of the learning agenda, so it's great to have the visual representation, Kelly, I agree, but we probably do need a text version as well. This is all part of our next extension, I believe, of the SLDS grant, and so we'll work together to have a draft version a draft text version to share with the team, and that would probably be feedback that we'd like to have before the next executive board. So Katie, that's where you're going to have to help me with the timeline.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that whatever feedback that we get from y'all here will help inform how we work with the data governing board in the next couple of sessions. But yeah, the plan is to have an agenda for you all to respond and vote on in March at the next meeting.
I did have one thing to flag, but I want to take Sarah and Dante's questions first. So let's do that first. Sarah, you are muted, but I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
I'm always muted. I apologize. Just a quick question. I see housing security. I mean, CCH represents the Homeless Management Information System. Housing security far spans beyond that. So just something to note, because I want to make sure that all the right stakeholders are participating in the conversation.
That's really helpful. And I when I shared this slide originally with Katie and Scott, I was with the draftiest of language, and so I know that the way that the phrasing works isn't as far-reaching. So I'm going to make sure that we'll float some things around to make sure that it's as representative as possible. Thanks for that. Dante, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I have something I think we we might be missing or might want to add, but I also don't know that I'm clear on exactly what this is used for. Is this saying that a
I'm so glad you
question has
asked.
to fall into
Yep.
these categories for us to take it up?
So yes, so the learning agenda really provides sort of a set of priorities. So when
Okay.
we receive a data request, it's best that it falls into this sort of set of priorities. We can't pull the lever on data that aren't part of this arrangement. So
Okay.
so if something came in, for instance, where it involved another agency who isn't part of this table yet, we couldn't necessarily take it up because we couldn't promise to be able to match and integrate those data.
Okay.
So what's interesting is the existing agenda, one of the major areas is barriers to success. And that's where even though a lot of things in the current learning agenda are around higher education specifically, most of the requests have fallen under barriers to success. That in and of itself is an indicator that we need to expand the learning agenda as well as represent all of the sort of diverse interests that now exist at the table.
Okay, so I'll just throw this out there, but I won't be upset if it's rejected. So in part because we have an agency APO to us, which is CHRO, but also because of some work we're doing in our agency. What about diversity, equity, and inclusion kinds of concepts? And I don't know if that would be its own item because it could kind of cross all of these, but we do have an agency that's what they focus on.
So it's interesting that you raise this because I went back and forth with Katie. I said, there's sort of these 4 tenets that have come out of the analysis of the questions. I said, should we use these tenets as a learning agenda or should we use the subject areas? So I think both actually fit in here. So I think the requests have to fall into these subject areas. Equity is this really important and special topic that we think should always undergird, should be used as a criteria for taking on the data request. So the other tenets that kind of came up in our analysis was that it has to be outcomes focused. It's great if there's kind of a long-term or understanding of sort of longer term outcomes, equity and sort of equity in both provision of services and access to services. And then the last thing was, we do get agencies log these questions and we often get questions around effectiveness or cost savings and impact, which has a greater impact. So those 4 tenets we think will be also used in evaluating data requests. I think we already use those kind of informally, but I think in our revision of the learning agenda we'll include those as also criteria for evaluating data requests.
Okay.
So I'm really glad you raised that.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. I don't know what CHRO keeps for data and if in future we would want to include them. But we just did our AAP plan not long ago. And so I have to imagine that they've got a lot of data that might be helpful even on every agency.
Right. That's true. I think that's a Scott and Katie question in terms of the availability, how that works with administrative relationships between agencies and other offices and councils. So we can probably take that part offline, but I agree that I think the equity piece is part of the criteria for when we get a data request.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So next steps, Teacher, to answer your question, we will share this as well as a draft text version with the group, and we'll make sure to also, before we do that, solicit any questions from the agencies that weren't present. There were 4 of them, and then we'll share materials around with enough time for review and reconsideration of feedback before our next executive board meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that
Thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it. Thanks to the group for your feedback. Hi, Jen. We see you.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I
have a
just had a
comment?
question. I don't know, we were talking, I know, and I'm sorry, I joined a few minutes late, but I didn't know in terms of raising visibility, whether you wanted to consult with like the governor's office, Rachel, or any other stakeholders about a learning agenda to sort of let folks know about P20 Win and maybe to leverage it. It's just a question.
I love that idea because as we were talking through this learning agenda, we were saying that it really is an expression of state priorities. So there probably are senior voices that should weigh in on that. So I'll leave that to Scott and Katie to make those connections. But I do think that that's probably a really good next step as well.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so I'm going to move us along to our next agenda item, which is on system improvement. and an update on P20 Win's partnership with the Data Integration Support Center and efforts around improved security and technology. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you for this part of the agenda.
Thank you. Excuse me, and I'll bring up a graphic in a second as well. But so this is, I think, something we also shared with the Data Governing Board at the last meeting, and I think we'll come back to the Executive Board sometime early next year, probably April or May, maybe 2 meetings into the year. But just wanted to make sure folks are aware of work that's going on kind of in parallel through the Data Governing Board and the different agencies. So I think one, we've had sort of 2 things to focus on in the last year, and we're looking to get some assistance to develop sort of a plan and a roadmap for us, and working with this group called Data Integration Support Center, or DISC, that are based out of West Ed. So the 2 things that have kind of happened in the last year. One is exactly sort of what we just discussed, the expansion of agencies, the interest in looking at a range of topics where you're seeing how people touch or navigate kind of different systems, the complexity of the way in which people cross over between, workforce programs, higher ed, education, early childhood, housing programs, that means that we're getting a lot of requests in. I think that's what Katie's alluding to. We're getting new requests. We're getting complex requests. So the one on disconnected youth had 5 agencies and sort of dozens of different files that needed to be pulled together for that. The one that she brought up coming from Sentencing Commission is 4 or 5 agencies with, again, covering a lot of different programs and areas. So we're getting people who want to use data in a way that's, bringing together a lot of different agencies. And so that's good, but we want to be able to meet those use cases and sort of be responsive to that in a timely fashion. I think what you also saw from the Disconnected Youth Report is it took a while to get some of that pulled together. It's a new effort, new agencies, and so some of that is just kind of a learning process. But we want to make sure that we can take on the kinds of things that answer policy questions that your agencies, state leadership have in mind. And so we want to be able to meet kind of the increasing, volume and complexity of the use cases that come through the system. And the other is we want to be able to address challenges that we have kind of with the process to date. So I think what you have at least seen in the board packets is we've had a handful of security incidents in the past couple of years where we've had information exposed at different points in the process. That's not good. It's the kind of thing we're seeking to prevent wherever we can. So what we want to do is make sure we take a holistic assessment of the way in which we move your agency's data, link, match it, produce it for analysis across agencies. We haven't had a holistic assessment like that for some time, and we have, again, a lot of new agencies involved in a higher volume of requests coming through. So we're going to work with DISC to do a security assessment, take the recommendations from the security assessment, and then feed that into kind of a roadmap. I'll pull up that graphic. Sorry, I should have done this a second ago. Pull up a roadmap for looking at system improvements. Where is this? They made a nice timeline. I didn't make this. But this kind of walks through the phases here. So again, we're trying to make sure that we can meet the use cases and the use of data that that agencies and state leadership want, and address the security issues that we've seen in the last year and a half through the system. So it's kind of a twofold process. DISC, again, are a group based out of West Ed. It's a set of people who've worked on these issues kind of nationally at federal agencies, at state agencies. And so we've got a group of people who are providing technical assistance to us over the 6-month time frame, who've got a lot of expertise in longitudinal data systems, integrated data systems. And so we're lucky to have them. It's at no cost to the state, which is also very helpful. And again, we just kicked this off last Data Governing Board meeting, December 1st, and we anticipate, I'll walk through the steps here, that we'll have some things to report back to the Data Governing Board and probably the Executive Board sometime this spring. So what they're going to do is we've had the kickoff. They're going to look at the process that we currently have, the way it works for the now 15 agencies, the legal agreement, not just the technology, but the legal agreements, the governance, all the policies and procedures that relate to that. So you're going to take a look at the current process, give us a security assessment sometime in the January, February timeframe, produce some recommendations if there are any urgent security issues. And I think we sort of believe that it's something we need to be totally on top of. They're going to provide some recommendations to mitigate those issues in the short term, and then make kind of long-term recommendations to us about having a more modern system where we can, again, manage the kind of complexity of requests that are coming in from agencies and produce, data safely, accurately, securely, at a sort of quicker time frame. So we'll get those recommendations. They're targeting April, so sometime, depending on the timing of the board schedule for next year, April, May of next year, you may hear results from this, and we just wanted to identify it for the executive board as it kicks off. And if there's ways in which you want your staff to be involved beyond the members of the data governing board, please let us know. They're kind of just getting work off the ground, but we're lucky, I think, to be working with the DISC team, and we'll get some advice from them, and they'll learn from us and our experience here. Any questions or comments? I can send the graphic with the materials afterwards.
Looks like we have one question.
Yep.
Scott.
Hi, this is
Okay,
Jan Key, CSCU. Very excited about having disengaged. Thank you, Scott, and thank you for sharing that. And it sounded like my question was, how will agencies be involved in their discussions, deliberations, and whatnot? It sounds like it's going to be happening through the data governing board. I just want to confirm that that's the place, or are there going to be other committee meetings? I think it's really good work, and we really want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think primarily the data governing board is the point of interaction. That's the board that sets the kind of data policies for the system. We'll probably have a subset of agencies that are, more interested, so that if agencies want to participate more actively, we can get a subset involved in that. And I think they'll be reaching out to folks for interviews and kind of initial conversations to do that mapping of the current system soon. But again, we just kicked off sort of a couple of weeks ago with them. So we'll figure out a little bit, maybe tomorrow or the next day, kind of the working arrangement. But I think the primary nexus is through the data governing board. But again, if there's folks from agencies you want involved for some other reason, don't hesitate to raise that, and we can do so.
Sure. No, please just make sure CSCU is at the table. Thanks so much, Scott.
Absolutely.
All right, so anything else on the DISC engagement before we move on? Great, thank you, Scott. So the last item on our agenda, we have 15 minutes left in our meeting, is rebranding. And this is a discussion item for the board. So it's listed on your agenda as the SLDS branding, and Katie had to just remind me that that stands for the State Longitudinal Data System, which is essentially the work that this group has been working on. Longitudinal Data System by the U.S. Department of Ed. We have, as we know, been focused a lot on education and workforce because that was the original impetus for this work. But with the addition of somebody like myself, who's sitting on the board and working on health issues, and now DOC and lots of other agencies, the question has arisen by your team at P20 Win is whether we should talk about rebranding to include more, because we're doing more work in social services, mental health, child welfare, judicial branch, etc. So we thought we would just open it up for discussion to see if people had thoughts one way or another, whether we should undertake a more formal process of rebranding, maybe assessing our brand as it stands currently as P20 Win, and whether it needs to be tweaked in any way. That's something we could talk about having external support to do, for example, or alternatively, is this something that people don't think is necessary at this point in time? And the P20 Win name has been around long enough, and people kind of know what it is. So I'll open up for discussion. Commissioner Bartolomeo.
Thank you, Commissioner Gifford. Um, so, I'm not opposed to necessarily to the idea of rebranding, but I genuinely would want us to think hard about that because, in the state of Connecticut, we right now have a whole lot of branding campaigns going on. And I think that there's a lot of confusion out there with just even some of those, like, job ct.gov, there's all of these kinds of things. And we've just settled on this one, make it here, which is great. But P20 win, most people don't know what it means, but they know it, I think. And so I would hesitate to try to rebrand again, especially if it used the word Connecticut in it, because I think we are overusing that everywhere and it's rather confusing. So that's just my thought.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jen.
I'm not necessarily opposed to a rebrand. I think that the organization needs to increase its visibility. And I'm just, to Dante's point, I'm Commissioner Bartolomeu. I feel like rebranding is going to make us lose a little bit of traction in that, like, we don't really well known, but the people who do know us as P20 win, right? So I just gave, I give Scott and Katie some feedback to just say, like, what can we do to raise the visibility of the entity itself? And I worry that a name change may not help with that raising of the visibility. But at the same time, I'm totally understanding of the need to sort of potentially figure out a way to sort of expand the brand a little bit, because it's more than just workforce and education at this point. But I am just a little worried that we'll lose traction by changing our name when we're sort of just gaining traction.
So maybe it's more brand awareness than rebranding. Elena?
Thank you. I would tend to agree. I think it's really important for this group, our group, to really be defining the why, right? Why is this work so important? Why is it important to our state? Why is it important to our agencies and how we're working together? Why and how is it important to the children and families and youth and adults and whatnot of who we're serving? I think if we can really define that and be able to message that strongly, then we'll continue to increase the buy-in, right, from residents, from others within our state in order to move our work forward.
Kelly Marie?
Branding is such a tricky thing. And I think there, with the expansion of P20 Win and the fact that P20 Win isn't always very well known, I know it took me a little while to wrap my head around what it was. And then I actually had some conversations with other members of P20 Win who didn't realize that they were members, the folks that I was speaking to at those agencies. But it is kind of an abstract term, P20 Win. So I don't know if there is an opportunity to somehow maybe keep some elements of the existing title or like graphic elements potentially with an expansion of the name, and maybe you attach P20 Win to it for a little while and then gradually wean yourself off. A lot of major brands do that. You see Dunkin' Donuts has gone to Dunkin', right? To try to so just different things. I'm not a branding expert, so I would say that it's probably important to maybe get a consultant group, a marketing team in to help kind of understand what it is you're trying to do and consult with that and maybe do some market surveys to determine, which way to go. Not saying you should or shouldn't, I'm just kind of adding my opinion of a process, that's all.
Yes, Alalia, did I say your name right?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
I agree with what's being said. I do think that expanding the education of the the board and what it stands for and what its mission is important. I do feel like, preschool to 20 with all of the added agencies that we've got, kind of is an antiquated term. And I know that initially it was really catered around the educational system, and now there's just so many other stakeholders involved. I'm wondering if we could rebrand in a sense where we keep that acronym, but take preschool out, if that makes any sense. I don't know what everyone's thoughts are, but I just wanted to give that feedback.
Go ahead, Elena.
Thank you. At the Office of Early Childhood, we are much earlier than preschool, right? And when we think about our work, it's holistic, and it starts prenatally and at birth. And so I would support expanding that age range to prior to preschool.
Tim.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'm of the school that, most of the P20 win thought process is a utility. And I think that, you turn on a water faucet, you get water, you flip a light switch, you get lights. And I feel like this body needs a little bit more seasoning and integration and usage before we start looking at branding. I think we want to have like clear functionality, and I think once everybody gets a lot of comfort with it, I think that the messaging will come more organically to a group just by virtue of turning on a switch, figuring out how it's doing, getting references of how the data is being collected and where it's actually being useful. So I don't know that running into a big rebranding piece at this point makes sense, but that's just my sense of what's going on. And I like the breadth of it. I just feel like the group needs to gel a little bit more and be a little bit more comfortable with interplay, and then we can look at that. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Scott?
I'm just going to add a couple things from the OPM side as the operating group for this. So I think we're kind of hearing like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but at the same time, like trying to figure out ways to reflect the changes that have been, kind of undertaken in the past couple of years, and maybe we can, and awareness, not necessarily rebranding, but we can look at sort of ways to get a sense of where things stand, what the strengths, weaknesses are. I lower my hand, and I don't know, kind of figure out how to situate ourselves. I'll say kind of two things. One, from the OPM side, it is a little bit of a struggle in conversations sometimes to just kind of explain the rationale, like why does it say preschool through 20? We had a very interesting discussion with somebody who was interested in a data request to look at substance use disorders across the state, and it was linking together multiple agencies, and it was pretty well thought out. And so to sort of Tim's analogy, it's for them, it's kind of like, well, I flipped the light switch and water came out the faucet. They're expecting one thing and they get another one. If the sort of branding is around, education and longitudinal things, and they're looking at, substance use disorder. But I think that's just kind of food for thought for us. The other question that Jen raised, what can we do as the executive board members? I think that was Jen. You are our best ambassadors. This is like the critical role for the executive board. So if there's things where you see that, okay, either to the learning agenda discussion, I have a policy question, or I have a question that I want answered with data, to like bring those questions to the table, or if there's a conversation where you see that, oh, somebody should be, using this resource, turning the faucet, flipping the light switch, whatever it is, and that's not happening, like please flag it for us, because I think we want to make sure that the work is being done to do what Elena talked about benefit families and you know the folks that are living in Connecticut using state services and so on. So your role as ambassadors for it is critical for us, and so really value the support and the thought on where we are situated and how it works.
Thanks, Scott. So in the interest of time, let me make a proposal to you, Scott and Katie, which is I think there is some consensus that around a potential communication strategy that ties in with what you were saying, Scott, which is, you know, something for us to have a set of talking points or some other kind of tool that board members could use when discussing P20 Win. I'm gonna assume that there is some budget available for this work because you all proposed, you know, potentially doing this branding exercise. Could you, the staff, bring back to the board at our next meeting a proposal around some communications work that really sort of ups the visibility of P20 Win's work, but not necessarily does a rebranding as maybe an alternative to achieve the goal that you were trying to focus on? Go ahead, Dante.
So I'm going to throw this out there, as crazy and ridiculous as this might sound, but it would be super cool if we could actually keep P20 Win, but just assign other words to the acronym in a way that worked for everybody, because that way we could keep what's out there, but just have it mean something that's reflective more of the group. And just even for like the two, you know, we've got 2 Gen. I mean, I don't know. There just might be some way, if we played with it a bit, that we could still have P20 Win, but it means something else. Just a thought.
Thank you. So let's incorporate that idea into this suggestion around maybe a souped up communication strategy for the organization, and see if that's a viable alternative to a rebranding exercise. Does that sound okay to board members as an alternative? I see one head nodding.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we'll
We
take
can all
that
make
as
that
a
the
thanks, Jen.
conversation. We can make that the conversation around our dinner tables. Throw out words that start with P and things with.
Great. All right. So we'll do follow up on that issue at our next meeting. Thanks, everyone. That was really, I think, helpful, constructive feedback. All right. That is our last agenda item, unless anybody else has any walk-on items that they want to add. Anything else? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Gary moves. Any second?
Second?
Second.
Dante, was that you
Yep.
seconding?
I second.
You know,
Just say your name, please. I'm sorry.
Kelly
You're
Valerie.
if you need it, I'll say
Thanks,
it.
Kelly. Okay. Gary moves, Kelly second. Any objections to adjournment? Please let us know. Great. Hearing none, we will adjourn. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in 2024.
Happy holidays.